how can you become a master of creation, the creation of your life, in the way that the Bible teaches that humans are made in the image of God. Rather than the physical image, we're talking about the blueprint of creativity, that we have the same power to create, just not at the same level as God. God creates universes that affect billions of people and apparently billions of planets and galaxies, something much beyond our capacity. However, each one of us creates a universe that exists within your mind, and that universe then is manifest in the world that you have created for yourself. And that's exciting, because you have a lot of influence over the universe that you live in, that really mostly is within your mind, within your heart, and then the physical version of that. We have talked about the various steps that creation follows. And a couple of weeks ago, you heard me deliver a message which was, emotions are the killer of truth. Well, this week, worry is the killer of your dreams, because worry is an interruption to the flow of action. And one of the primary solutions to eliminate worry is to take action. Now, there are some caveats, which I'm going to talk about, because sometimes your best action is to wait. But your best action is never to stop the process and worry. That is never helpful. To stop and ponder is a very different consciousness than to stop and worry. The Old English origin of the word worry means to strangle. So worrying is a life-constricting energy. It's life-constricting consciousness. And yet, we can't help it sometimes. Or can we? Because when you begin to feel some anxiety about a situation, that is not necessarily the same thing as worry. Because the anxiety is a sign from within my soul that there is an uncertainty that's creating a discomfort. And that's part of life. You will reach points in your creative process where you don't know what to do. And when you don't know what to do, a human soul often starts to feel anxious. They begin to wonder if it's going to work out, and they don't know what their choices are, and that uncertainty spurns a natural state of discomfort emotionally, which we call anxiety. And that is a God-given response to a phase in the process. The phase is, I'm not sure what's going on, and I'm not sure what to do next, and I may not be 100% comfortable with that uncertainty, so my soul serves up a feeling of anxiety. And the best possible response to anxiety is to attend to whatever action can be done. Generally, the first and best action is to contemplate, to meditate upon the situation and go, okay, my soul is serving up anxiety. What is going on? What is causing me this feeling of unrest around the uncertainty tied to my creative process? When we live in the worldly consciousness, we take all that clarity away, and people feel anxious, and then they tighten up, and they don't really know what's going on, and they begin to act somewhat impulsively, incorrectly, as far as whatever it is they're trying to manifest, begin to do things in a scrambled way that is generally not contributing, not helpful. So what we want to do is honor that the anxiety comes up to alert us that there is something about the future, about the process that we're in, that is creating a feeling of discomfort, and we want to take action. So you hit that fork in the road. There's the uncertainty, the anxiety. Now there's the temptation to get worried. And what are the fruits of worry? Strangulation. What are the fruits of strangulation? You know, death. ultimately. So it's a slow way to kill yourself if you, at the fork in the road, you go down the path of worry. And as I was meditating on this message this morning, I was thinking about how our world, our people, are so enamored with professional sports. And I went, we're also enamored with professional entertainment, actors and writers and musicians and artists. And it became very clear to me that we love to watch people who are excellent at things that we enjoy. And it's super cool to watch somebody play a sport that you play, but play it at such a higher level. To watch somebody dance or sing in a way that moves you. We love excellence. And maybe we don't stop and go, well, how did that person get to be so good at the thing that they're doing? And if you've read any biographies of people who have excelled, really, they're not that different, except they worked harder. Now, some of them have some natural talent. Some of them were fortunate enough to be in a situation where at 5 years old, their parents created an environment where they started to sing or they started to play, and there was somebody in their family that saw they had some natural talent, and they, pushed them and encouraged them. And the individual responded to it. They didn't reject it. And a lot of elements came together. But I think at some point, you'll find if you talk to these folks that they were driven to work really hard. And there was no guarantee they would make it in entertainment, get a record deal, have a hit, make the major leagues. There's no guarantee of that. However, the intention can become so fierce that they will do everything in their power to increase the probability of that success. And I have fortunately been around people who've played professional squash and professional hockey. I've been around people in the entertainment industry and in the music industry. I've talked to some of these people who are relatively famous. And ultimately, they're not that evolved spiritually necessarily. They just committed to the work and did not get deterred ultimately when most of us do get deterred. And why is that? Who knows? Who knows where the development came in them to persevere with that kind of energy? But I've never met one person that said that their path has been without obstacles, without setbacks, without moments of doubt, without moments of fear, regret, mistakes. I mean, that's part of it. So, if you want to be a master at creation, then you're going to have to work at it to a certain degree like somebody who works at becoming a professional athlete or professional musician or a great chef. There's so much experience that we have to have in order to manifest and create at this high level. Traditional religions will often say, especially Christianity, pray to God, all things are possible. God will answer your prayers. And I can guarantee you there's probably millions of people who go, I'm trying so hard, but it doesn't work out. I wanted this, I prayed, I did everything I could, and I didn't get it. I think that sort of teaching and that sort of spirituality is exciting when you hear it because there's a surge of hope. Oh, it's possible, I could have the thing I want. But what about every kid, man, women, who aspire to be great and to make it in the entertainment industry, in the sports industry or whatever, and they don't. And they prayed and they worked hard. Where's their faith going to be? I mean, I think of guys in the top 10 of squash, because that's a sport that I'm very passionate about. And there are some guys that get into the top 10. The top 10 best players in the world. I mean, that's just like, that level is so amazing to me. And yet number 10 can almost never take a game off number 1. So the discrepancy between 10 and 1 when where they live is huge. And imagine somebody who's the 10 best player in the world out of 8 billion people. I mean, of course, 8 billion people don't play squash, but you understand. Like, that is a huge accomplishment. And they get on the court with number one, and they can't win a game. I mean, it's just really fascinating to me. And what do you think goes through the mind of number 10? He probably doesn't go to bed going like, oh my God, I'm so great, I'm number 10 in the world. He's like, I don't know why I can't beat number one. Like, I can't beat number 2 or 3, and I rarely get a game off number 4. And occasionally I beat 5 through 9. What is wrong with me? That's probably how a lot of those guys think. Because, you know, in order to have the kind of work ethic to get to the place where you're number 10, you know, your balance can be a little bit off. Because really, it's not normal to be somebody who pursues the number 1 spot in professional sports. It's like, it's an anomaly. And I admire it on one level, but not at the cost of the rest of your life. But, you know, maybe that's why I didn't pursue things as hard as I could have, because spiritual balance was more important to me than, you know, being the best. But now, as we are in the thick of Taurus, because now today is May 2nd, 2021. So we've moved out of Aries, and Aries is that sign where the new life comes bursting through. There's inspiration, there's excitement, there's the willingness to go into an unknown area. Now we're, you know, it's like we've packed all our bags, we've started on the journey, and here we go. Taurus, consistent, steady application, working, not changing our minds, not questioning our decision, plowing forward. That's a lot of the energy of Taurus. What happens? Well, it's not as exciting as the creative phase of Aries, where it's all new and there's all this energy and all this possibility. It's like, no, I have decided I'm going to focus on these things, and now I've got to, as the expression goes, do the work. And you'll often hear people criticize other people. Hey, you didn't do the work. You didn't pay your dues. The doing of the work is the action piece. And if you want to be a creator at the level that I believe you do want to be, you're going to have to try and fail and consistently practice. You know, why is it so inspiring when you hear about these stories of this guy who wanted to play pro basketball, and he's, you know, he grew up in a neighborhood that was, you know, crime-ridden. You know, they did have a court nearby, and the net was long taken away, but here's this kid, and he would just dribble for hours and hours on end, and he would shoot free throws for 4 or 5 hours, and people would look, he's still out there, and there's a certain marvel at the discipline and just the perseverance. And yeah, after 3-4 months of doing free throws for 4 or 5 hours, the guy hits 85% of them, no problem, practically with his eyes closed. Because his body, his mind, everything has become unified after hours and hours of practice. He has done the work. He is doing the work. Now, if you've ever done the work on anything, you become very humble. Because it's hard. And it doesn't come quickly, necessarily. So if you want to be a master of creation, typically you don't go around touting yourself as a master of creation. Because the experience of getting to a point where you have some proficiency, often you realize the degree to which you're only just getting started. So the mindset changes, and you become humbled by the fact that there are things that you still don't do well and you don't know how to do. And that applies in spiritual progress as well. You begin to realize that worry is like contributing to the demise of your vision, because it's an energy that has no faith. And yet it can be comforting for people because we grew up in a, you know, sort of a cesspool of worry. So we're used to that. There's a little bit of a funny aside, which I'll probably edit out. But, you know, I remember sitting down to eat breakfast with some people, and, you know, there would be maple syrup, which, okay, I'm Canadian, so maybe that's part of the problem. But maple syrup is just like a God-given sweetness. It's just, I don't know, it's got caramel and smoky, and, you know, it's just freaking amazing. And these people wanted Mrs. Butterworth's. I mean, I was like, do you realize that's just like sugar, water, and coloring? They're like, I don't know what it is, but I like the taste better than this. Okay, No, back then I was like, that's crazy. But that to me is, it's a very good metaphor for the problem with worry. It's familiar and there's a comfort in it. It's like processed cheese slices. There's no cheese in them, people, okay? It's not cheese. They're not even allowed to call it cheese. They have to call it cheese food. But, I mean, we had those when I was growing up. I think I intuitively knew that as soon as I can, I'm never going to eat this again. But there's a familiarity to it. I don't want you to be familiar with worry such that you're more comforted by your own worry than excited and inspired by the grind of the work that you have to do. When you do the grind and you do the work, you are fulfilling the pattern that God has asked you to. Some people will criticize me and say, well, you're saying you have to do it, but it's God who does it. Trust me. I have studied this and practiced this for decades. So I'm not excluding God from the mix, but also I'm not making a prayer and then sitting back and doing nothing, going, I've done my part. No. Prayer is one small part. So if you have an intention and you're clear about your intention and you have meditated upon it and you have been able to see it and you have written it down in some sort of vision statement. So now it's a creation. No, it hasn't manifested yet, but it's a creation in progress. And if you haven't done that, if you just sort of had whimsical thoughts about something that you wanted, and then you made some sort of a prayer, which did not necessarily have a lot of strength to it, and then you wondered why a month, 2 months later, you really just have the same experience you've ever had. And then you turn and go, either there's no God, or it happens for a reason, all this kind of diluted spirituality. Have you determined your desire, seen the vision in your mind, written it down, and began an action plan? And in the times when you get discouraged, the times when you start to experience obstacles, have you at that fork gone to worry, or have you gone to action, contemplation, faith? I think the first steps that I just talked about are relatively easy because there's nothing in the way. You've got to figure out what you want. You've got to draft it up in some sort of vision. You write it out, so it's thought followed by word. So you write out the word, and then it's action. Now in the action phase, you're having to garner elements in the material world. You're having to garner the support of people oftentimes. That's when people start to freak out. Because how am I going to get this person to do this thing? How am I going to get this to do this? And it's like, well, do you want to be a master of creation? Well, you're going to have to figure that out. You're going to contemplate it. You've got to learn, how do these people make decisions? What does it take to communicate in a way that elicits the kind of energy that I want from them? I don't want to be manipulative, but I'd like to influence them from the place of love and truth. This is something that I seek to manifest. So if you haven't done the steps, don't go, oh, everything happens for a reason. Things do not happen for a reason. Things do not happen if I do not sustain the action necessary. I do not put my love upon the vision for a long enough time for it to gain the momentum. Study plants. Study other living organisms to see how life functions. Now, we don't exactly function as plants, but if you plant things, you learn about how life starts, and then, there's a sort of a critical phase that it gets to, but you are the steward of that. You have to get the plant through love and attention, but you cannot replicate the sun. You don't create water, but you give it water. And you start to notice, is it beginning to show signs of flourishing and blossoming? And some plants do and some plants don't. And the ones that don't, you go, okay, what is different here? Is there something affecting its growth? Is it under a state of trauma? I mean, for those of you who have ever planted a tree, you do have to sort of traumatize the roots in order to stimulate them to move out into the soil. So there's a way to do that. But if you're too afraid to do it, because I don't want to cut the roots because that'll kill the plant. Well, no, actually, wisdom shows that you do have to stimulate the roots and you cut some of them, and that creates a trauma and the plant responds to it because the plant wants to live. But if you cut too much, it might be too much. So there's all sorts of ways to learn how to do this. Primarily what I want you to focus on as we enter into this month is do not worry. Do not make that choice at the fork because it does nothing to help you. The burden is on you to, okay, I'm feeling uncertain, I'm feeling anxious, I need to meditate, I need to take action. Well, what if the action's not right? Well, sometimes you're not going to know. So you're just going to have to take the action, and you're going to have to learn from it if it's correct, if it's not correct. And maybe next week we'll talk about the difference between doing something that seems smart and something that seems wise. Because wisdom is born of experience. You can read about all sorts of stuff, and you can become very intelligent and articulate, but wisdom is born of having gone through something and knowing it based on your own experience.